Morning, peeps. I'm back. And what a few hours it's been. I think it was 8 o'clock last night, New Zealand time. I got word of these new changes that are happening with FPL. And to be honest, I went into a bit of a head spin. I mean, I'm not bipolar or anything, but I can get rather excitable. And when I first saw the huge changes that were coming to FPL, it's fair to say that I went off on one a little bit. I was all over the place. My head was all over the place. And ever since, I've been trying to get my head around it. And it's probably a good job I wasn't recording 3 or 4 hours ago, to be honest. So, which is why I waited. So, the first thing that's happening, massive change to FPL. I'm not going to go into the details of the actual change because you can go and look that up yourselves. This is more about my reaction to those changes and how I think how it's going to affect the people that matter, which is like 90% of the players, like 9 million people. My mates down at my work and in my friends mini league and all that sort of thing, the casuals who vastly outnumber engaged managers, how this change is going to affect them. And we'll have a look at basically whether this is a good or a bad thing. So basically, we're going to be getting points for blocks, interceptions, clearances, and tackles. So that's like 4 extra categories of scoring, but we have to try and keep an eye on. Now, the app itself will keep you informed live what's happening with your score. But if you're just sitting there watching a game of football in the pub, you are not going to know how many points your players are accumulating until after, when you have a look and have to go onto the FPL website to see, because it's complicated. Very complicated. And I get they wanted to widen the pickable player universe. I've been talking about that for a long time, how they need to bring in other players to kind of reduce the template and all that type of thing, and to give us more players to pick from. So it's good in that sense, but I think the way they've gone about it is not the best way. I think they should have gone for the system they had in the Club World Cup, where you can reward differentials with extra points, because there's a huge difference. This new system here, it is very statistically based. Like since last night, I must have seen 100 stats tables from people pointing out which players are going to do better under this system and which players are going to do worse. And it's very tricky. Now, let me show you. Don't worry, I'm not going to make a team here, but I just want to use this to make a point. So this is FPL team. Now, traditionally, if I want to make a team, I can do it in 5 minutes, just from watching football matches. Do you know what I mean? My knowledge as a football fan means I can easily make a team within 5 minutes. I know who the defenders are that are likely to keep a clean sheet, like Arsenal defenders, etc. I know which defenders are going to likely get attacking returns, like Aït-Nouri or Guardiola. Same with the midfielders. Goals and assists, easy to do. You can make a team very easily. But now, if I had to make a team now, quite honestly, I would be stuck. I would not know where to start. For example, under this new system, Tarkowski would have got last season an extra 40 points, for example. So I don't know whether I should be picking Tarkowski or sticking to my wing backs, or whether I should, any defender basically. I do not know which ones to pick, because I have no idea which defenders make the most interceptions, which ones make the most recoveries, clearances, tackles. You can have a guess when you watch a game to see the most dominant defender, but when you're watching a game, your focus isn't really on who the most dominant defender is. So you really don't have any idea. I have no idea here who's the best. just by making a team. I wouldn't know, for example, Cucurella's supposed to be much better under this new system, but I don't know if that makes him better than a 6.5 million defender that goes for goals and assists or anything like that. And this is a big problem. The big problem with it all is it is so statistically based that the only way you can get a grip on it is by looking at statistics. There is really no other way of being able to select a team now. Looking at football is not enough. And I put a post on yesterday after hearing the news. For the first time in the history of FPL, it will be impossible to play the game properly without looking at statistics. Watching matches is no longer enough, and that is a great shame. I wrote that post, and pretty much everybody has pretty much agreed with it. And it's a great shame. I can no longer go on and just make a team. Now, obviously, I am going to be glued to Twitter pre-season. I'm going to have to be looking at streams that concentrate on statistics. I'll be looking at tables and all this type of thing to acquaint myself with it. But your average casual, my mates at work, the ones who roll up on a Friday night to pick their team and haven't really looked at any stats or anything, how are they going to pick their teams? They don't know who all these players are that get the blocks and everything, and the tackles and the recoveries and the interceptions. They don't care about all that. They just want to pick players that they can enjoy watching and are going to score goals. Which is why I think if they'd gone for the extra points for differentials, not many points, just a couple of points like this system, then it would have been so much better. It would have rewarded people for looking for players that other people haven't picked. Whereas this season, we all know everybody's going to pick the same ones because this system is so predictable. You can pretty much say before the season even begins that Caicedo will once again be top in this new defensive category because he was top last season. Nothing's changed about his game. He's still going to be top again. Tarkowski will still be very high up. It's not a very unpredictable system, and it's one that is easily managed by models, basically. And I would not be surprised if someone using a model, computer-aided help, database, whatever you call it, wins FPL this season. You'd almost expect them to win FPL now. And managers that just watch matches, this is a huge disadvantage for them. And like I said, you've really got to go and look at stats. And to prove the point, within 5 minutes of the game opening, we had all the affiliates from Scout on Twitter advertising their paid members area. The defensive analyst tool, discover top defensive performers with 15 years of historical data, Opta-powered data, track defensive trends, customize and compare defensive metrics instantly. And of course, on the very same day this happens, they put out a special 40% off or whatever. They obviously knew this was coming. They all planned for it. And as soon as the news hit, and we all thought, how on earth are we going to know all about these stats? We don't have a clue who to pick. What can we do? And there's your answer. You have to go and pay a third party to find out all the stats. Now, if this rule is happening, but we don't yet know what information will be on the official site. Now, if they put in a rule like this, which they have, then it is absolutely imperative that all these stats are free and available on the main site. Otherwise, people that do not pay for information are at a huge disadvantage. Now, Az here, I actually messaged him. Well, I didn't message him. I put on here on one of these threads that I felt it was an extremely poor taste that the former co-host of the person who made these changes is trying to profit from them There's his affiliate link there. Look, it's profiting from these changes straight away by trying to get people in to pay money to join Scout. The other day I did a reviewer's Scout. It was quite a scathing review on the load times, etc. And I felt I'd been a bit harsh on them, so I took the review off. But I wish I hadn't now, because, I mean, obviously this isn't false Scout. I mean, Scout's fault. But it really isn't a very good look. You know, you've got somebody heavily into stats who was associated with Scout for years and associated with the black box for years, gets a job in FPL, comes up with a very statistical solution which is very helpful for all the services and providers of data that charge money for FPL. You know, it's very helpful for them. And it's taken the game away from grassroots, in my opinion. You know, I like Mark, I like Az, but I think there were better ways to go about this. Like I said, it's good they've wanted to increase the player base, but whether they have or not, we don't even know that for sure, do we? Because we don't yet know whether the price is already going to be built in to reflect it. Like if Tarkowski's $1 million more expensive because he got an extra 40 points last season, then you're not going to pick him anyway. So it won't have really changed too much in the sense of widening the possible base to pick players from. So that's one thing. You know, I mean, are we going to have to pay for data? Because there won't be many free sources to get all that data, you know, and it's so easily mapped by models, isn't it? Interceptions, blocks, tackles, clearances. But with the naked eye, watching match of the day, you just haven't got a clue. And that is my main issue with the whole thing, basically. Not so much the change itself, the fact that people are going to be forced to pay money to these sites if they want to win FPL. Because if you don't, you're just going to struggle. You're just going to struggle. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's right. And it's hugely, hugely bad for your average manager. I mean, when the assistant manager chip came out last year, a lot of people just found it overly complicated and buried their head in the sand. Well, I can see the same thing happening here. You know, it's crazy. They're just going to ignore all these stats, basically. And it'll probably be to their detriment in the long run, because people that do have the data and all the stats are going to see which players are worth bringing in. And it'll only be an extra 1 or 2 points a week, but it'll add up to give them a very unfair advantage over people that don't have access to those stats or don't want to pay for data. You know, and the engaged managers say that's a skill. Paying for data is a skill. Looking at FPL review is a skill and all that, you know, but FPL review is going to be much stronger this season. You know, the models are better pick a combination of 11 players much more easily than we can now, with all these extra variables to consider. That's the plain truth of it. You know, whether we'll still finish ahead of them or not, I do not know, but it certainly does move the goalposts in their favour somewhat. Anyway, let's move on, peeps. So, where are we? There's another one somewhere. Where is it? We're getting more chips. We got 2 of everything. 2 of everything, peeps. We're going to get fat. We got a lot of chips to eat. You know, this one here is a bit more frivolous. I don't really care too much about this one. But having got like 2 points from a bench boost last season, I'm hoping that having double chips will even the luck out a little bit. But it could make it even more uneven, couldn't it? But so we got 2 lots of chips. So basically, every week for the entire season, you're going to have like 10% of managers will be using a chip or whatever, you know. So it does make looking at ranks, etc., a bit of a waste of time until, I always say anyway, you know, that until game week 38, there's no point looking at your rank. You know, it showed with my own team. I played my chips all at the end. I think I went up to 30k or whatever from a long way back. People asking me in game week 20, why are you at 2 million? You know, it's meaningless now anyway. You just, it's not over till it's over. But all the time, people are going to be using chips. I don't know how I feel about this because they're not terrible chips. We haven't heard yet about a mystery chip. We don't know if we got a mystery chip. We don't know if the price mechanism's the same. We don't know the prices. And we also don't know if the deadline's moving. You know, we don't know if there's more changes in store. But these ones here are quite powerful. So, but I'm neutral about this. You know, like I said, I'm happy that there's more players that we can pick from, if in fact there are. You know, it's probably going to be the same ones. You know, we're all going to pick Casado. If we're going to go down that route of looking for or Norgard. You know, it's going to be very few players probably that are going to be benefiting from this new system. So I don't know what I feel, peeps. I don't know what I feel. I've calmed down a bit now, but always changes, I think, are initially met with negativity. You know, I think 90% of responses on social media to it all have been negative, to be fair. I kicked off like I do. Like I said, that's what I do. And I've had time to reflect on it. And I really do think they missed a trick in not implementing in some way differentials, because that would have made such a difference. It would have aided for casuals. It would have rewarded you for finding a player that nobody else really was interested in. It would have encouraged you to look for those sort of players. Whereas now, all that's happened is you're encouraged to look at table upon table of statistics. And that's certainly not what I wanted. I think they should have been concentrating on trying to find ways to reduce the influence of computer-aided help, not actually play into its hands. You know, but Mark comes from a kind of computer background, doesn't he? And he's into all like football statistics and everything, and we've certainly got a lot more of those now, that's for sure. And to my mind, it's not positive, but we'll see. But if, you know, like I said, I would not be surprised if people using models win FPL this season. You know, they will argue that it's better than someone winning because they were lucky or they played illogically or non-optimally and they won FPL. You know, they say it's better that somebody won it by playing optimally. Except the only thing is, of course, unless they wrote the model themselves, then really they're just copying someone else's work and it's paying off big time. You know, I mean, like I said, let's go and have a look. This is the thing with Scout. I mean, I went on here the other day and did that review because the load times were absolutely appalling. And that was when nobody was on it. I reckon it would have made thousands last night. People would have panicked and gone straight and joined. But I urge you not to. I think you should wait until you see what stats are on the official site. Because like I said, if they're going to bring in a big change like this, then they really need to make it transparent for everybody and easy for everybody to see which players are going to benefit from these tackles, interceptions, blocks and clearances. I've got it right, peeps, which is pretty good because I've only had 2 hours sleep and I've got back up to do this. You know, I couldn't sleep last night. My head was spinning from all this, absolutely spinning with it. So I don't know if they've got these new things up here yet. I can't see anywhere where we go. Player stats, or do that again, shall we? Hang on, I've clicked it. Doodle-doo-doo, doodle-doo-doo. Not too bad, about 5 seconds. We don't want that. We want forward. Let's have a look at forwards. Oh, no, we better not actually, have we? Defenders is the one we want. We'll have a look at defenders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 seconds to get the page up at defenders. Right, I felt guilty. I felt guilty the other day about my review. You know, somebody said to me that I was a bit harsh on them. But I didn't set out to give them a bad review. I didn't want to give them a bad review. But when they're hawking themselves all over Twitter, trying to get people in within 5 minutes of the new rule changes, they're obviously rubbing their hands at these changes that Mark had, fallen into their lap, basically, didn't it? All these changes. So let's have a look. What am I looking for, peeps? What am I looking for? Involvement, goal threat, defending, expected. I don't even know if they've got these new stats in, have they? What would I look at? Defending, I suppose. Another 12 seconds will pass by. Another 12 seconds of your lives, peeps. Going. Right, where are they? Here we go. Oh, here we are. Tackles, interceptions, recoveries, interceptions, clear. The sad thing is that by even showing this, I'm actually advertising them. Do you know what I mean? By pointing out that you need, it helps them, which is crazy, isn't it, in a way? But it's got all the interceptions per minute and recoveries per minute and all this type of thing, you know. Interceptions, we've got Maguire at the top. Recoveries, Livramento. Clearances, Huijsen's up there. Danso. Blocks, Collins is top of. See, and it's just a head blow. You've got all these 4 categories to be thinking about. I don't want to be thinking about all this crap. I just want to be thinking about goals and clean sheets and assists and all that type of thing. You know, so I'm not really in favour. Get off, Cat. Cat's going crazy. She wants feeding. Wants to know why I'm not feeding her. And it's because I've had a huge shock. An absolute huge shock, peeps. And so that's all that. Where was the homepage again? It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. You know, what is a clearance? What is a recovery? What is an interception? What is a block? What is a tackle? I mean, for heaven's sake. For heaven's sake. You know what I mean? You know, maybe, obviously, once we start playing it, we are going to kind of know who the best ones are. We're going to learn who the best ones are. But it's only going to be through looking at statistics. And people like myself who do shows that don't rely on statistics, it makes it very difficult now. Makes it very difficult. I mean, what do you talk about? You can't talk about I watched this game and so. You know, I'm putting Palmer in because he was brilliant the other day. I might put Caicedo in because he got 5.4 tackles per minute and 3 interceptions per 5 seconds, blah, blah. But, and all this lot of bollocks is what I'm going to have to do. So anyway, peeps, I'm off now, because I really have had enough, basically. I've got to go off and do a park run soon. But I'll leave you with this thought that this is the first time in history of FPL that it will be impossible to play the game properly without looking at statistics. I mean, people told me, you look at statistics already. Well, you do, but they're only obvious ones. They're not stuff like this, which it just puts the game into the hands of the computer nerdy people, really, rather than the people who watch football. So they'll be rubbing their hands together, won't they? The Analytics FC and all those people, Absolutely ridiculous. Right, I'll talk to you all later, peeps, anyway. I've had a gutser and I'm off. So cheers for now then, peeps.